is when now they try to go out there and as well make some noise so that some individuals would know that they exist and they're capable to handle tight cases. And as I say this, we all know very well that it is the Supreme Court case that is slated to begin upon that filing by the Azimio One Kenya Alliance as to thrashing, or better yet, registering their disappointment on how the elections or the tallying process of the election were handled or was handled. And so at this very hour is when they get to engage all the best of lawyers that will represent them, as well the respondents will be coming in with their lawyers, and we get to understand just how best they would handle this. The IBC, yes, being part of the respondent most likely, then will also require lawyers, great legal brains, to represent them at the level of the court in 14 days so that they would accord them that win. And so I'll be having lawyers in studio this morning so that they can help us, just slightly unpack what is likely to happen with this Supreme Court case, as presented by Azimio One Kenya Alliance boss, that is Right Honorable Raila Odinga, who said that they consider that declaration by the IEBC chair, that is Wafula Chebukati, Monday, to declare Deputy President William Ruto as the president-elect. They consider that null and void. But just how possible is it for that, that position to hold at the level of the courts, and how the courts are going to handle this? We'll be looking at it. Karibu sana. It's good to have you. Remember, we've been doing this for the better part of the week, last week, and we keep doing it, and we follow the events as they unfold to make sure that we update you with the same. And so later on, virtually, we'll be having Wakili, or the advocate Eliud, joining us. That is in a bit, but in studio already is none other than Advocate Paul Macharia, who is already on standby for us to begin this conversation. And so, Wakili, how have you been?
I've been good.
Karibu sana, the first time on Morning Cafe?
Yes, it's the first time.
Yes, it's good to have you.
Not the first time here.
Not the first time on TV47, but definitely the first right here on Morning Cafe. Tunapenda wageni, karibu sana. I hope you've had enough of coffee. Okay, well, you at least, I hope you've gotten coffee.
Yes, I've
because
gotten.
we have about 1 hour here, so you might need some more.
It's fine, I will ask for it.
Sawa sawa. What do you make of the politics of the day today?
The politics is very static. It's something that evolves day by day.
Yeah.
We've seen several individuals moving sides. The independent candidates, we've seen them shifting. We've seen the UDM members shifting. So politics is very dynamic. And of course, politics and interest. And when you talk about politics and interest, the politicians will not only look at their interest, but also the interest of the peoples they represent. So we expect much to happen as time goes by. We expect various parties and coalitions to suspect that there will be disloyalty among their members. But ultimately, as we move along, there shall be some sort of, the settledness. The political instability will at some point settle, so that at least when then we're able to understand this is the direction we're moving. Yes. All
right, and I agree with you. The shifts and turn that independents would switch gears almost immediately to join the winning team from what it is that we know as of now. And the fact that we hear Jubilee elected leaders were also having a conversation with those ones of Kenya Kwanza UDA, then you can be rest assured that it's a game of interest. And so this game of interest we'll be looking at as time unfolds, and also as we get to understand some more as to what we are likely to get in the next crop of leadership. And so we welcome you to be part and parcel of the conversation again. Remember, it is hashtag Morning Cafe, hashtag Feel Good Friday, and we get to hear what you have to say at TV47 KE across all our social social media platforms. So let's take a quick breather, and then Wakili, we come back now, get into the details of this game of politics, as we also look at how our students are preparing themselves, you know, to make sure that they cover these 2 weeks that has been lost courtesy again of the electioneering process. So after this break, we come back with more.
The home of untold stories. Usiyakubalie maumivu ya misuli kukatiza ratiba yako. Kaluma Pain Balm ni dawa ya kusugua iliyotengenezwa kutoka kwa miche maalum ili kutuliza maumivu ya misuli. Kaluma Pain Balm. Shhh. Maumivu ya kizidi, pata ushauri wa daktari. Fire.
Dimension. Despite being visually impaired, he is a jack of all trades. It is our quest to find answers on how to take care of children with special needs and those with disability. You do not need to see musical notes to understand music, but rather to have your soul feel the vibe.
Actually, for us to make a wheelchair, we have to take measurements of the user.
After doing my assessment, I get to know the parent, I get to know the heaviness she's carrying.
Disability comes at different stages of life.
Well, do you know what's happening around you? Morning Cafe with heated political debates. Baraza la Siasa.
Hiyo kitu azungumzie, angalie hali ya maisha ya watu.
Informative health discussions. Business, farming. Tasty Wednesday, Fitness Thursday, and Feel Good Friday with amazing DJs, celebs,
waimbaji, kuna comedians, alafu kuna wajinga,
and music bands every Monday to Friday from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. The next set of millionaires are farmers, as we know agriculture has been and still is the backbone of our economy. As we traverse the different counties to meet different farmers, we ensure to get the story of how they started farming and even how they continue to penetrate the market and overcome the challenges.
Hapa, the reason why nilieka goose na si ducks. Goose, they are very easy to maintain.
A lot of farmers keep on calling, inquiring whether you're supposed to raise some seeds in the nursery or you're supposed to do them directly in the field.
The greenhouse helps us to control the temperature because the temperature needs to be between 28 to 32 degrees.
Walk this journey with us every Sunday at 6:30 p.m. It's no secret, construction ain't cheap. But how do we make it affordable? Different individuals are finding ways of cutting down cost by use of pre-stressed slabs other than reinforced concrete, recycling plastics to make pavers.
The brick is stronger, it's cheaper, and it's lighter.
And recycling wastewater in your household.
What happens to my waste from the washroom, the solid waste? All that can break down.
Those are just but a few. Every Tuesday at 7:30 p.m. we talk construction.
There's no alpha without an omega. There's no lead without any followers. No man is an island. We need each other. We need this conference.
We say it, we do it, we act it.
Kama una mpenzi wako,
Kila siku kama walivyosema, kila siku maishi mapenzi.
We don't toe the line, we set the standard. We don't eat the grass, we lead the pack.
As an alpha male, you're also a leader. Not to just women, friends and family, but to everyone else you've never met before.
We are the beauty, the spice and the brains. The men's conference where men become alpha males.
And you can catch us every Wednesday at 10 p.m. This is The Grind. Only those who will risk going too far can possibly find out how far one can go.
Well, a couple of matters here to touch on. The hashtag is Morning Cafe, and as well hashtag Feel Good Friday at Linda_Raila TV47KE. And so on these matters, and I'm glad that even as we were on that break, Wakili and I were just trying to look at the possibilities of this case, or the Azimio team to have a case in this case, or in this whole matter. And so they are confident that they are going to challenge this in court. The Right Honorable Raila Odinga, seasoned politicians, and also with proper understanding of where the country is at in terms of how we are managing, in terms of the numerous interests that would need to be looked into. Wakili, do you think, first of all, they have a case based on some of the things that they seek to present to the courts? In terms of factors, at least we are privy to what their complaints are about, and they say this is how Chebukati handled it. Perhaps they could have question marks on the numbers and the balancing of all this. Do they really have a case, and do they stand a chance?
To respond to your question, so the constitution and the laws we have in Kenya allows any party that feels aggrieved to move to the court. Now, the courts that we have, they are courts of evidence. So as much as what we can say, they have a case if they have the evidence that is required to justify the prayers they'll be taking to the court. Now, when we look in the context of a constitutional, for an election petition, there are a number of prayers that one may seek, and there are a number of grounds that any petitioner may advance to the court. What we have seen in the media, there are some of the purported grounds that may be relied upon. But we have not seen the finality of the petition. And the petition will also have the grounds which we are saying, the evidence. Now, what we have seen in the past, the constitution, the constitution, the courts have been very pronounced in terms of what an election is. And it is no doubt that an election is a process. And this process, the constitution gives the parameters that this process should meet. So any persons who want the court to interfere with the results of an election has to satisfy the court that, one, these processes, the constitutional processes that ought to be there, they are not there in that particular election. The constitution provides that elections should be free, fair, accountable, and transparent. Now, if a petitioner moves to court and has evidence to prove that, one, that election was not free, two, it was not fair, three, it was not transparent, and four, it is not accountable in terms that one cannot justify what the voters voted and what was announced. So there are other grounds that a petitioner may provide to the court, the issues of violence, and this violence should be the violence that affected the voter turnout and the voting of the intended voters. And then it will not stop there. The petitioner will also have to prove that as a result of the alleged violations that affected the turnout of voters, the results were affected either by missing numbers of voters who did not vote, or by the process by which the vote was cast. So there are a number of things that the court needs to have. Of course, when you are arguing about a constitution, an election petition, in normal cases, the standard for civil cases in the burden, it's 50% plus one, just above the half. We call it 50% plus one. It's above reasonable doubt. And then, but for election petitions, it is beyond 50%, but not to the level of criminal cases. The burden is standard of proof. So what is expected of any person who wants to challenge the election is that they have a greater burden to prove to the court that, one, this election was not done as per the constitution dictates. Two, the persons who conducted the elections conducted themselves in a manner that breached the legitimate expectations of those who are voting, in a manner that they are subverting the will of the voter. Of course, the concern and the concentration in terms of the election is the voter. Because the constitution provides that the supreme power belongs to the voter. So as we say, the election is a process, then any person going to court, you will have to justify to the court by way of evidence that the process from the start to the end where the vote was announced had some illegalities, had some unexplained circumstances, had some clear opaque instances that affected the results, as well as the process. You know, when the law provides for a process to happen, then if that process was not done before the pronouncement of the results, the court will question on what basis did the staff or the members of the commission either failed or ignored a particular express provision in terms of their participation in dealing with votes. So the burden really lies on the person who is moving the court.
And yes, well, the burden of proof lies with them. By the time you decide to go challenge something in court, it is because you have a genuine feeling that you can satisfy the courts by presenting, a watertight case, formidable evidence as to the question of petition, right? And therefore, in this case, we would want to assume that the Right Honorable Raila Odinga and the Azimio One Kenya team would be having this in mind. Not the very first time that they're going through such a process, and therefore they understand the intensity of it and the indeed requirements that the courts would have for them to have a case. While this could be valid and that the law then stands and that they go to the court and they're able to present this that is watertight, at a time where we come from a 2017 where the presidential vote was nullified and then we got into a fresh election, they boycotted. And when I say they, well, perhaps just to look at Right Honorable Raila Odinga and a majority of his foot soldiers are still there, they boycotted that process and then they took us through a tough time at this very moment to just get to create that balance, and then came in the handshake, and then came in COVID-19. While it's been a peaceful coexistence, it really has not been so well. And therefore, we understand the numerous interests that could require for the courts to consider as they make this ruling. Do you suppose in their own wisdom, and I know we are not supposed to deliberate on this further because it's something that then is left for the courts, in their own wisdom, as they continue to consider the Constitution where it says it's about the people, would they consider nullifying this?
Now, one thing that people need to understand about the operations of the court has its own principles and guidelines when dealing with matters. Every matter is dealt with based on laid down principles and guidelines. Of course, the overarching principle of the court is the rule of law.
Yeah.
The rule of law binds all the individuals and all the state offices and organs. Now, This rule of law is provided for in the Constitution. So notwithstanding, of course, we understand that the election has so many other factors connected to it. We have the social aspect, we have the economic aspect, and then we have the political aspect.
Yeah.
Election per se is a legal process. Electoral process is a legal process because they are legal instrument that provides for how an election should be conducted. As much as there are other interests that would wish to be predominant in the issue of election, the rule of law has to prevail.
Yeah.
So, notwithstanding what the social feeling would be, the courts, because the judicial officers, they are accountable and they took the oath of office that they are to uphold the constitutional dictates, which is the rule of law. And in Kenya, as a democratic republic, we are in a state where we believe in the rule of law. What the law says, that is what ought to be done. That would have to be looked at when we are talking about the rule by men, where individuals may make decisions notwithstanding what the law provides. I think so far we can be happy that we are above that status. As at now, predominantly Kenya is governed by the rule of law. We have seen numerously judges making decisions that per se you would see that is not, I mean, just a judgment to make. Just a case in point, recently there was a judgment by High Court Judge Justice Dande that made unlawful or declared unconstitutional some of the guidelines that had previously been given by the Chief Justice. High Court Judge overturns directions and rules by the Chief Justice.
Yes, this also in regards to whether the likes of Deputy President William Ruto should be sworn in. I think that is one of them that was there, and also this one about whether then legal minds that are going to be involved in the case in the event that then the Azimio One Kenya presents their court, that the legal minds should not take part in such conversations in the public domain.
Yes, that is a good example that you see when a law is affecting a good number of population, the Constitution provides that there should be public participation. When you are passing a legislation or a law that ought to affect some members of public, you need to involve them. High Court Judge said, I mean, these guidelines did not involve the members who are to be affected. Two, the courts are not to make laws. There is what we call the independence of government institutions, independence of powers and operations. So when you're talking about the rule of law, at times the courts have been progressively upholding that position. And what we expect is that whoever goes to court, the courts will have to be bound by the oath. I mean, the judicial officers have to be bound by the oath they took to uphold the law. No matter how painful it would be, in terms of when we consider other factors that may be affected, the law has to prevail.
Wow. Because
that is the sanctity of the process. And that is how the people become confident in the law. You know, the reason why the law has to prevail, because today you are the complainant. Tomorrow you will be the person who will be responding. So for you to have confidence in the judicial process, the law has to prevail. No matter of course we know, even the judicial officers in their personal space, they have their personal preferences.
Right.
But then they are bound, their personal preference is not to take center stage when they are discussing matters of national importance. There is the guidelines that ought to guide their conduct as judicial officers. So what we expect is if the petitioners prove their case, the law should prevail. Yes.
All right. And this is going to be interesting to watch. We're coming from a space where in 2017, IEBC and, generally the stakeholders, again, on the election process, had lots of cases in court. And I remember there are instances where the courts were forced to, yes, overlook what needs to be done and say that in the best interest of the people, which is also a provision in the Constitution, it would be wise for us to take this ruling to this direction. And so we are keen to see how the courts are going to handle this in the best wisdom possible. I am delighted to introduce Wakili Eliud Ngugi, who is joining us virtually. Wakili, good morning. Thank you for creating time.
Thank you for having me.
And so, as you were just joining us, we are trying to unpack the possibilities of, this case by Azimio One Kenya Alliance, standing a chance in terms of also it to be successful, to get to levels where, we can have the election nullified and for us to go to a new process. I do not know what you make of it, and I know I've heard you here before. Do they really have a case? And if they do have a case, do you suppose then that the courts would term it necessary to go the legal way and overlook every other interest of the common mwananchi, the high cost of living, the fact that we also had we had two elections in 2017 that really costed us, that we are coming from tough economic times, occasioned by the COVID-19 and so many other things. And therefore, most of the Kenyans would actually tell you that in as much as we are great supporters of Baba, I think we need to just shed this off and move on. Would the courts consider such interests?
First of all, the Azimio team is raising quite a number of issues which I believe are important. We need to actually discuss. One of those issues is on the commissioner's role. What is the role of the commission? What is the role of the chairman? We have the Constitution and the Election Act stating that the role of the chairman is actually the declaration of the final results of the presidential election. And we have a regulation as well that actually provides for the same. So they have raised this same issue because they also rely on the schedule of the Election Act, which provide that the commission has to agree before the declaration is made. But we need to also remember that in the BBI case, there was a similar issue raised because the commission was only consisted of 3 commissioners, and the High Court ruled and told that the BBI case could proceed with only 3 commissioners. And so there's that issue of looking at the previous cases, the issue on the commissioners, but it also raised an issue to do with the voter turnout, because from the results, the voter turnout was said to be 14,200, but in the declared results, the voter turnout tends to be less the number, of which it's being credited to the fact that we were using both KIMS kits and we were also using the manual register. And therefore, the number of people who were on the register may not have been included in that initial figure that was given. So there are questions to do with what happened to that number, and because the difference between the number 1 and number 2 is only 9,000 votes, then if that one is agreed upon, the issue on the voter turnout and where this additional number went to, then they are able to actually tweak the results and maybe even give us results whereby both parties will not have achieved the 50+1 requirement. Is a third issue to do with polling stations having a bigger number of the presidential votes compared to other candidates. So you find in a station, the president gets more votes than other candidates. So there's a question on where did the additional votes come from, and how come one had equal number of votes, they went to the ballot paper to cast their ballot, and they only cast their ballot for the president, and ended up not having casted the ballot for maybe the women rep or for the area MP. And so, and the same person not walk out with any ballot paper. It is a crime to actually walk out with a ballot paper from a polling station. So that is a question that they are raising. How come we have more presidential votes than other candidates? And the last one is probably on the lack of pronouncement of the 34B results by the presidential returning officer, Mr. Chebukati. So we are raising an issue because there are some stations where that was not raised, but the regulations of 2017 provide that the returning officer, the national returning officer, can actually proceed and make the pronouncement and declaration of the presidential results even without having gotten all the 34 Bs, on condition that he believes that the results do not, from those constituencies, do not overturn or do not affect the winner. And so these are some of the issues that are going to be raised. They are raising these issues, important issues. We need to foresee a situation whereby what if the national returning officer refuses to announce the results of the presidential election? What happens? Because we do not have a law that prescribes that maybe that the vice chairperson of the commission should want to announce the declaration of the results. So these are some of this group is quite important, and we should not ignore it. But at the same time, we need to also consider that the Supreme Court does not act in vacuum. The Supreme Court has been observing what has been happening, and some of these issues which were raised, and especially the issue on the percentage not being more than 100% by 0.1. The Supreme Court was watching on how that opaqueness was presented to the nation by the 4 commissioners, and the fact that that percentage may, if you do the proper calculation, and you find that it's around 14,000 votes, the fact that these 14,000 votes may not actually overturn the election results. And so the Supreme Court does not act in vacuum. We have even noted that the speeches were similar, and so they may actually see some form of influence and lack of integrity in how that presentation was made.
Okay, we would want to pick it up from there, Wakili, and I throw it back to Paul Macharia, who is in studio. And so, Wakili, it is fine that there could have been some influence, yeah? But we all understand that these are politicians, and it's like the way I'm in this space of the media, and therefore I interact with these people, we have conversations with them, and we have these people who are commissioners. They were stationed at the National Tallying Center, and equally we had agents of the side of Azimio as well as Kenya Kwanza stationed at this space of the National Tallying Center. And so you cannot tell me that these people were not having conversations. So whether influence or not, they perhaps could have decided that we take this direction and it's for these reasons. Whether it was on basis of the fact that the commissioners could have been influenced, but still it's something that can't be proven. Is there a way that that then can be quashed on basis of, or you were influenced by this side or you were influenced by that side? And I mean, even within the commissioners, like you said, even the legal minds themselves, they really have a stand before they go out to make these pronouncements. And so there is a space where they sit. So if you are a commissioner and deep down inclined to a certain direction, you definitely would want to tell your people there is a problem here, raise an alarm, don't you think?
Now, what, of course, we understand in the deep down of the minds or in ourselves, there is that aspect of association, and there is aspect of the personal bias. But what you understand, the Constitution requires that the IEBC not to take sides. These are the referees. Now, just to give an analogy, in a football match where the referee is favoring either side, you do not expect to get a fair outcome of that match. Though we know the referee may have his personal preference in either of the team, his conduct should not take precedence over what he is required to do. He's just supposed to be a neutral party, giving people a fair ground. What we expect, even if they had their personal bias, they had their personal preference, these are people who took up the job by having signed an oath of office. This oath of office is binding on them as the commissioners. What they ought to do, it is to raise issue in a manner that does not seem to be siding with either party. But they should not come out as supporters of a particular team, yet they are being seen as referees.
Is that what is happening in the country right now? Do you think the commissioners are coming out as though they are in support of a certain party?
What we have seen in the media, there are arguments that, oh, these might be from a particular side, and that's why they are acting that way.
Okay, hold it, Wakili. Allow us to take a short break, and then we come back on that very note, so that we do not appear to be assuming things. I think we need to unpack it further after this break.
The home of untold stories.
Are we set? We're good?
Despite being visually impaired, he is a jack of all trades. It is our quest to find answers on how to take care of children with special needs and those with disability. You do not need to see musical notes to understand music, but rather to have your soul feel the vibe.
Actually, for us to make a wheelchair, we have to take measurements of the user.
After doing my assessment, I get to know the parent. I get to know the heaviness she's carrying.
Disability comes at different stages of life.
How well do you know what's happening around you? Morning Cafe with heated political debates. Baraza la Siasa.
Hiyo kitu azungumzie, angalie hali ya maisha ya watu.
Informative health discussions. Business. Farming. Tasty Wednesday. Fitness Thursday. And Feel Good Friday. With amazing DJs, celebs.
Waimbaji, kuna comedians, alafu kuna wajinga.
And music bands. Every Monday to Friday from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. The next set of millionaires are farmers, as we know agriculture has been and still is the backbone of our economy. As we traverse the different counties to meet different farmers, we ensure to get the story of how they started farming and even how they continue to penetrate the market and overcome the challenges.
Hapa, the reason why nilieka goose na si ducks. Goose, they are very easy to maintain.
A lot of farmers keep on calling, inquiring whether you're supposed to raise some seeds in the nursery or you're supposed to do them directly in the field.
The greenhouse helps us to control the temperature because the temperature needs to be between 28 to 32 degrees.
Walk this journey with us every Sunday at 6:30 p.m. It's no secret, construction ain't cheap. But how do we make it affordable? Different individuals are finding ways of cutting down cost by use of pre-stressed slabs other than reinforced concrete, recycling plastics to make pavers.
The brick is stronger, it's cheaper, and it's lighter.
And recycling wastewater in your household.
What happens to my waste from the washroom, the solid waste? All that can break down.
Those are just but a few. Every Tuesday at 7:30 p.m. we talk construction.
There's no alpha without an omega. There's no lead without any followers. No man is an island. We need each other. We need this conference.
We say it, we do it, we act it.
Kama una mpenzi wako, kila siku kama walivyosema, kila siku maishi mapenzi.
We don't toe the line, we set the standard. We don't eat the grass, we lead the pack.
As an alpha male, you're also a leader. Not just women, friends and family, but to everyone else you've never met before.
We are the beauty, the spice and the brains. The men's conference where men become alpha males.
And you can catch us every Wednesday at 10 p.m. This is The Grind. Only those who will risk going too far can possibly find out how far one can go. T.S. Eliud.
So I decided, let me just take this up, put the teaching on hold first. Let me try see where this can go.
I mean, the opportunities are a lot. But is that all you need? Oh wait, there's more. This seems a little too much. Let's slow it down.
You do this is something you do out of passion.
Join me, Violet Njoki, as I navigate through the maze of the increasingly dynamic business environment and quiet down the noises. As I help you flourish in business, every Monday at 7:30 p.m.
It's no secret, construction ain't cheap. But how do we make it affordable? Different individuals are finding ways of cutting down cost by use of pre-stressed slabs other than reinforced concrete, recycling plastics to make pavers.
The brick is stronger, it's cheaper, and it's lighter.
And recycling wastewater in your household.
What happens to my waste from the washroom, the solid waste? All that can break down.
Those are just but a few. Every Tuesday at 7:30 p.m. we talk construction.
Despite being visually impaired, he is a jack of all trades. It is our quest to find answers on how to take care of children with special needs and those with disability. You do not need to see musical notes to understand music, but rather to have your soul feel the vibe.
Actually, for us to make a wheelchair, we have to take measurements of the user.
After doing my assessment, I get to know the parent. I get to know the heaviness she's carrying.
Disability comes at different stages of life.
How well do you know what's happening around you? Morning cafe with heated political debates. Baraza la Siasa.
They might not be giving us the correct position. So ultimately, the court will have to make a determination. If the court finds that, of course, a discussion ought to have taken place before the announcement was made, then the court will have to decide what is the consequential effect of a determination that has not been exposed to a discussion. If the court says that there was no need to discuss what is to be announced, then what is the consequential effect of such a finding? Yes.
Okay. All right, there you go, Wakili. I do not want us to dwell much on this because, like we always say, you know, when a matter is, first of all, set to be presented to the courts and then it sits at the courts, we really do not deliberate on that much. We can only wait for the courts. And with this one, we are happy because we know is within 14 days, we already have a ruling and we know what the way forward then is. But President Uhuru Kenyatta promises to lead a smooth power handover. And this one, interestingly, he promises to the visitors that come to visit him all the way from a different nation. And we ask ourselves, just why is it that President Uhuru Kenyatta is not saying something so far? Eliud?
Yes. It's the same question that I think everyone is asking. Why hasn't he congratulated President-elect? And that has been an issue, but maybe we all have an answer because he was not his preferred candidate, and therefore we do not expect him to congratulate him. But also the intervention of different visitors from the European Union and also having visitors from the church elders who visited him, the bishops who visited him yesterday, is just something that we can actually conclude that they had to find out from him whether he intends to hand over power. And although he does not have to present himself, because we have a case in the American case where President Trump did not show up for President Biden's inauguration. Even in our case, our constitutions provide that once we have a president-elect and within a certain timeline, then the assumption of office can take place. And therefore, it's not something to worry about the handover of power, because if already the constitution is there, the constitution of Kenya is supreme. And it being supreme, we shouldn't worry about the handover of power.
Okay. Well, all right. And so we can confidently say that President Uhuru Kenyatta then will accord us that transition, which actually he speaks of. And of course, he spoke to the visiting U.S. Senator, Chris Coons, and who also spoke to the others in regards to this, just how instrumental is the hand of the global fraternity in all this matter and also in all the determination that would be made by the courts.
The global leaders are watching us. Remember, we're a big brother in East Africa. How the power transition takes place is important because, one, we are the beacon of this end of Africa. We're a big economy around Africa. And so the transition is quite important, and we have so many interested parties who want to make sure that the transition, America as our big brother, is also interested in making sure that we have a smooth power handover, because that affects business between the two states. It affects our exports to their country. And so it is quite important, and that's why they are in Kenya. They are trying to make sure that the transition takes place.
All right. Well, I don't know just how good this is, and it's a beautiful thing to see that, well, there's that concern of the global fraternity, because as we always say, you know, we coexist together, and that you want to see a peaceful Kenya because you understand how instrumental it would be for the stability of the global fraternity. Somalia, not in the best of shape. South Sudan, not in the best of shape. And therefore, they have to be keen to make sure that we also do not have the country landing into this. But we have also had conversations as to the coming in of neocolonialism, the interference of the West, and sometimes having our leaders subscribing to what they say more, as opposed to what the Constitution and their duties are supposed to be. So when you see this happening, does it then bring on board some level of confidence, and especially to the investors who would be looking from afar to say, is this a place that you want to go back to, or maybe we should close shop for a moment?
Of course, we know as a country, we do not, we are not existing in a vacuum. Our stability or otherwise affects also our neighbors and also the international stage. We understand as a country, there is so much, the foreign aspect is so much part of us. And assume there will be violence or political instability, that will even affect not only us, but also our neighbors and our partners in various spheres. So the involvement of the foreign agencies is one to communicate the importance of having a peaceful coexistence. What they are communicating, in my own view, is that we believe in existence of functions. Of course, there is the party that is dissatisfied, and there is a party that is satisfied. But we encourage you as a country to use your internal mechanisms to settle disputes without resorting to what we saw in 2007. So, of course, this is a good sign that they have confidence in us as a state, and they are also encouraging our organs that, we believe in you, and we are encouraging you that above all embrace peace and trust in the process. So it's a good sign to Kenyans, and everything should go back to normal. As the parties who feel aggrieved, they are not saying that they are going to take their grievances on the streets. They are taking their grievances in the right channels, in the right forums, which is expected world over. Systems exist, courts exist, and what is expected is that people should believe in their institutions, and these institutions should operate without external interference, so that if the courts are given a dispute, they should determine that dispute without being interfered with. So it's a good sign that either parties have been involved. I saw they met with the president, they met with Right Honorable Raila Odinga, they also met with the president-elect. I am sure one of the issues that it was common denominator in all the conversation is at least believe in the processes and maintain peace. Talk to your supporters that they not go to street, they not resort to violence. Let us have a peaceful transition. Whoever wins, let there be a peaceful transition, so that the other aspects of the economy will not be affected as a result of a vote that was cast by Kenyans.
All right. And so a couple of things that Azimio One Kenya Alliance would be presenting. So far, there is this story that has been captured on the Daily Nation, Raila versus Ruto, the case files. And the Azimio Coalition is working on a broad three-pronged strategy to contest the declaration by IEBC Chairperson Wafula Chebukati of William Ruto as president-elect. And in the grand scheme of things, the argument will all come down to what the Raila team believes are inconsistencies, and that is in IEBC's vote figures that were declared turnout numbers, and then declared skeletons in the falling out in the commission, or of course the commission. So turnout, Chebukati initially reported a 65.4% turnout, which translates to around 14,466,779 voters, but this final tally was 140,028 votes less, at about 14,326,751 minus those who voted manually. Two, on the question of the voting patterns, Azimio will seek to know how hundreds of thousands of people voted for president only without a corresponding number of spoiled ballots for lower seats. As well, a split of the commission. Could the Cherera faction of the Divide Electoral Commission have more secrets in the bag, and would they be willing to reveal them? Also, these are the key three things, and a couple of others that will have the Azimio then manage this. And we are looking forward to have the wisdom of the Chief Justice Martha Koome, and of course the Deputy Chief Justice Philomena Mwilu, Mohamed Ibrahim, that is the judge, as well as Justice Njoki Ndungu, Dr. Smokin Wanjala, Isaac Lenaola, and William Ouko. And of course, we will not get much into this question, but just where does this case or this whole hula baloo then place us as a country in your own opinion, Wakili Eliud? Because, I mean, you all understand what we are going through, grappling with the tough times. Really, do Kenyans require to see another legal battle that literally, this is not just a legal battle that you will ignore. It's more or less like a legal battle that involves every other Kenyan. 50% of the supporters of Ruto and 50% of the supporters of the Azimio One Kenya Alliance. Wakili Eliud?
I lost you. Please
yes.
Come again.
I'm saying just how much of a damage or how much of goodness is this case to the people of Kenya? We all understand where we stand, and we are looking at 50% of Kenyans who will be following this case, courtesy of the fact that they identify with Deputy President William Ruto and those ones that identify with the Right Honorable Raila Odinga. And therefore, it's not a case that we'd want to say that we will be proceeding in court and Kenyans are really not privy to the proceedings.
Yeah, the proceedings are quite important, and the people who sit there are very important in this case. And so we, as a nation, have an interest. We have a vested interest. The kind of damage to be done by not taking part in this is quite big. And I had mentioned earlier on that this case raises important issues. It raises important issues which we may have overlooked during the drafting of these documents. And so it will be important for us to make sure that we get some of these issues raised and answered by these judges who sit in the Supreme Court, so that we have a guiding principle. We have what we call in court a precedent that we can use in the later to come years when we have similar cases. So this is a good case, and it is important for the public, because out of the registered 22 million voters and having a turnout of only 12 million voters and only having 6 million people vote, 7 million people vote for one candidate, the winning candidate, then it means that there is lack of participation, and it is important to find out why the rest of the members of the public not participating, and how do we engage with the rest of the members who may not have voted, because it's quite a big number, significant number, and we want a united nation. So to have a united nation, then it would be important for us to inquire and to find out whether our systems are really working.
All right, well, before we get to the question of education, and I think these are matters that are of interest, like we said, that perhaps the courts might need to consider as they're making a ruling or a judgment on this matter. And earlier on, before we got on air, we were looking at some of these key interests, the calendar of the schools. We have heard Professor Magoha saying that I hope the ruling really will not be that kind that would alter the calendar of the schools further, understanding where it is that we come from. But the weakening of the shilling, which is a story that has been captured on the Daily Nation, the back page. Currency devalued by 9.3% between June 21 and June 22. And of course, weakening shilling pushes up Kenya's debt by 500 billion. This is one of the biggest problems that we have as a country. And right next to that story is that one on the question of school. Extend school term or reduce fees. Parents now petition Magoha. Well, Courtesy of COVID-19, the calendar was altered, and now the election by around 2 weeks, which is not a joke actually, because in this calendar of COVID-19, you realize that 2 weeks can literally amount to half a term.
Yes, of course. One of the when there is the issue of political instability, when it is not very certain, the political dynamics will take. That affects, by implication, it affects the economic environment. And as we said, it also directly affects the social environment. One of the social aspects of environment that is affected by uncertainty in the political sphere is the school. You know, in Kenya, voting takes place in schools. Counting also takes place in, counting of votes takes place in school. So of course, there need to be a balance between advancing one aspect of a society's claim, and also not prejudicing the other aspect, because these kids, it is their constitutional right to education, and the government is obligated not to ensure that the education is not affected. It's the government obligations to ensure that everything that ought to be done to reduce or to minimize the interference or the access to right to education is done. So of course we expect and we are hoping the court will draw a balance. The court, as counsel said, the courts do not act in vacuum. They are part of the society. Some of these issues they are also experiencing. These are people who have also children in school. They are paying school fees. All the things we are talking about, they are experiencing them. So the judgment and the ruling of the court will also factor some of the things that the society is going through. And as my colleague said, when you look at when legal questions are put to the court, the courts will have to give a legal solution. For instance, the issue of the quorum of the commission. What will that question once determined, it will take precedence even in future, so that when such an issue arises, then the answer will be a definitive one. The issue of the numbers, whether a candidate can have more numbers than the other. I mean, a particular portion of the electorate, the candidates, you can say maybe presidents had more turnout than the other members. That's a question that the court will determine. And of course, the political environment is affecting various spheres. So our hope as Kenyans is that let there be an expedient determination and the solution of the political issues, so that the further suffering or the further effect on that political question on the other issues will be minimized. And we hope once that question is settled, then even business operations will resume normally without fear, without intimidation. Yes.
All right, all these factors that are of importance, Wakili Eliud, really should be put to consideration even as the ruling is being done. Interestingly is that, well, the Constitution stipulates that within 14 days we should have had a ruling so that we know how the country forges forward. That is to show how important and intense this matter then could be. Looking at all these matters that are important in the country and the factors that really need to be considered in the best interest of the public interest as well, what do you make of a possible, ruling that would be, considering all this, and that Kenyans then would get themselves back into a space where they can forge forward?
One, if all these issues are considered and actually we change the election results, maybe there's a recount, or maybe the court orders that we go back for a runoff. One of the things that is quite interesting is the fact that for the parties to be able to convince the court to do this, this would require them to present very appealing evidence and or persuasive evidence, and this evidence is questionable because we have an understanding that most of, for example, that issue on the voter turnout of the presidential vote being more than that of the other candidates, this issue may have been caused by the fact that the agents were not present at the polling station to actually make sure that this was the right thing that was being done. That maybe there were no ballot papers which were being added, but also it is important to note that the Kiai case came about with an authority that dictated that the IEBC as a commission should take the polling station results to be the final results. And so any other result that came, for example, from the constituency tallying center, is only to verify, is only to just verify. And the fact that we were using the KIMS kit, then this may end up being dismissed. But in case the Supreme Court is convinced of this and we have to go for a runoff, I foresee a situation whereby there will be a huge turnout for both the candidates, but mostly for the candidates who the Raila Odinga candidates will also turn out in huge numbers because they want to have the results in their favor, but also the Ruto candidates will also show up in huge numbers. But then we understand that the Mount Kenya turnout for this year's election was low, and this has a huge effect because even with the low turnout, we only had around 4 million votes being cast from Mount Kenya. So you can imagine if we have 100% or a 90% turnout from Mount Kenya, what this has is likely to do. And so if we have, if the Supreme Court orders people to go back to election and to vote for the second round, I foresee a very huge gap between number one candidate and number two candidate.
Well, all right, gentlemen, I think we can only wait to see what happens. There's still so much that we might need to capture, but all the same, let's make these stories for another day because Kenya is here and this matters will remain. And so I hope to get a hold of you some other time. Wakili Paul Macharia as well as Wakili Eliud Ngugi, asanteni sana for speaking to us. Unless you have something else to add, we can close it at that.
Yes, mine is just to urge Kenyans to observe peace, to go back to their business, and also be vigilant when they are required to give evidence of whichever nature without resulting to violence. Indeed, I mean, just yesterday you saw Sakaja and Igade
together
having a tea. So of what use would it be if we fight over individuals who ultimately will get together and have a chat forward about how to go about their business? So it's an opportune moment for us Kenyans, whichever side we supported, whether we won or lost, let's forge together for our own benefit. Your neighbor is your neighbor, your friend is your friend. Let the political difference not divide us. It's a good sign for us as Kenyans to observe peace, whichever the circumstance. And then we expect the courts to do what they are supposed to do.
Well put.
Thank you so much for the invite.
Thank you so much as well, Wakili. The two Wakilis, we close it here, not in totality. Remember, it's a Feel Good Friday. Freddie on standby with great music, as well as that session where we will now get to engage the artists of the day. And it will be an interesting session to have these artists also showcase what they do best. I will tell you, they want to go back to business. And therefore, that's the reason why it is important that we also appreciate